More Than Tony's Intern by Warlock Writer. Tony had no idea why he had to be in this meeting. He hated them and didn't know Pepper couldn't go for him. He sat, pretending to listen to what people were saying to him, nodding when it seemed appropriate to make it appear that he was paying attention. About an hour into the meeting, which was supposed to last until well into the afternoon, Tony got a message from an unknown number. The message was a picture of Peter, tied up, and a demand for money. Tony rushed out of the meeting, giving some excuse about important superhero business. No one bothered to stop him as they'd simply reschedule. The Avengers had recently moved back into the tower. Everyone was civil with each other, but nothing more than that. Bridges were still being mended. Despite this, Tony knew his best shot at getting Peter back to him quickly was by getting the help of the Avengers. They had all only met Peter a handful of times. None of them knew that Peter was Tony's son, nor did they know about his superhero alter ego. None of that mattered now, though. What mattered was getting Peter back and ensuring he's okay. Tony figured that whoever it was that kidnapped Peter thought Tony would act alone and not bother going to the Avengers for help, with all the tensions between them since the Civil War. It is true that the team aren't and probably won't be as close as they once were, but things had thawed. Even if they still hated each other, Tony still would have turned to them for help. He knew they were his best chance at getting Peter back safely. "I need your help," Tony announced as he rushed into the penthouse of the tower. "Hello to you too, Tony," Clint snarked jokingly. Steve was about to say something when Tony spoke up again. "Peter's been kidnapped. I don't know who by, but Friday's managed to trace the message I was sent to a location, and I need your help getting him back," Tony explained, rather frantically. He was trying to keep his usual calm demeanour, but found that difficult. Natasha could see the true panic behind the slowly cracking mask. To be fair, it hadn't taken long for her to figure out that Peter was more than an intern. "What, Peter? As in your intern?" Steve asked cautiously. Tony nodded before telling everyone they had 2 minutes to suit up and get to the Quinjet. They arrived there in about 20 minutes, and a fight broke out very quickly. Tony left the rest of the team to fight. He was heading straight to find Peter. He didn't care who he hurt or possibly killed. There was no amount of people or power that could stop him from getting to his kid. He figured the team would be fine on their own dealing with the others as he went to Peter. He prayed the whole time that Peter was unharmed and that he'd gotten there before any harm could come to Peter. "Pete, thank God," Tony breathed out as he rushed into the room where Peter was sat. Peter didn't show any recognition that he even heard Tony. "Friday, what's happening? Is he okay?" Tony asked frantically as he began undoing the ropes that tied Peter to the chair. Friday informed Tony that Peter had been drugged, which is why he was unconscious still. Somehow the drug was strong enough to work on Peter, making Tony suspect that perhaps the kidnappers knew more about Peter than first thought. She reassured Tony that Peter should wake up within the next few minutes. However, maybe groggy and all other injuries had already healed due to his advanced healing ability. Tony breathed a sigh of relief upon hearing that. Peter was going to be okay. He checked in with the team, who informed Tony that everyone had been taken care of. Tony told them to get back on the jet and that Peter was safe. Gently, Tony picked Peter up, cradling him close to his chest. When he stepped onto the Quinjet, Steve offered to help Peter into his seat, but Tony instinctively took a step back, not wanting to be apart from Peter, and afraid someone else could hurt him. Tony carefully sat Peter down, allowing Peter to fully lean on him. Tony made sure Peter was safely in his seat before they took off. He gently ran a hand through Peter's hair in comfort. He refused to leave Peter's side, not even when everyone was asking what happened. Everyone watched the exchange between Peter and Tony with such curiosity. They'd never seen Tony act so caring and so protective over someone, especially not over an intern. They were positive something more was going on with their relationship. Tony got Friday to scan Peter again, just to be sure, who informed Tony that Peter would be waking up soon and was uninjured. That seemed to satisfy Tony. A couple of minutes later, Peter stirred awake. "Hey, kid, it's all right, you're okay," Tony said in a voice much softer than anyone had ever heard him use. Again, their attention was on Peter and Tony. "What happens?" Peter questioned, his voice slightly slurred, presumably as an effect of the drug used on him. "You got kidnapped, Bambino, but they've been dealt with. I even got the Avengers to help," Tony explained before pulling Peter into a hug. "God, I was so scared they'd hurt you before I got to you. I can't lose you, Pete." Tony mumbled into Peter's shoulder as tears began to fall, tears of relief that he'd got his son back. If the team weren't shocked about their interaction then, they certainly were now. They'd never seen Tony so vulnerable and open. Normally, Tony went out of his way to hide how he felt. "I'm okay, Dad, I promise. I'm never leaving you," Peter affirmed, clutching tighter onto Tony. They both needed the comfort and connection. This moment of peace only lasted a few seconds before everyone else seemed to catch up. Natasha sent a knowing smirk over to the two, whereas the others looked stunned. Of course they knew Peter and Tony were closer than they made out, but since when did Tony Stark have a son? "Oh, wait a second, did Peter just call you Dad?" Clint exclaimed in surprise. Oh shit, Peter thought. The two pulled out of their hug and turned to face the team. Tony still had an arm around Peter as he refused to let him go, like if he let go of Peter someone could take him away again. "Okay, so we may have kind of lied when we said I was just an intern," stammered Peter awkwardly. "Since when did you have a kid, Stark?" Steve questioned. "None of your business, Rogers. All you need to know is I would do anything for Peter. So if any of you hurt him in any way, I will destroy you before you can even think about defending yourself." Tony snapped. Everyone could see he was being 100% serious. Clint smiled at Tony. He felt the exact same way about his kids. "Damn, I can't believe none of us figured out Peter was your kid," Sam exclaimed. "Don't include me in that. I always know more than you boys do," Natasha pointed out. It's slightly scary just how much she knew about everything. Then again, she is a super spy after all. "You don't count. We're all aware of your freaky ability to know everything," Tony brushed off with a laugh. Despite everything that had happened, he and Nat always stayed pretty close, and it didn't take much to get their friendship back to normal. "Speaking of me knowing all, I wonder how everyone here would feel if they knew I wasn't the only spider on board," Natasha said slyly, smirking at Tony and Peter. "What do you mean by that, Natasha?" Steve asked. Clint figured out what she meant, as he had some of his own suspicions. He knew he recognised Peter's voice from somewhere. "Don't say another word, Romanov," Tony warned. Nat brought a hand up to her mouth and made a motion to show her zipping her lips. "Wait, Pete, where are you from?" Steve asked. Before Tony could react and tell Peter not to answer, knowing exactly where Steve was going with this, Peter replied with a "Queens." And that's when the penny dropped. Peter is Spider-Man. Steve, Sam and Clint, on occasion, fired many questions and comments their way. Sam exclaimed his disbelief and asking how he got his powers. Steve mainly criticising Tony for allowing Peter to be Spider-Man and go to Germany in the first place. Natasha simply shrugged at them when Tony looked to her for help in diffusing the situation. Tony had told her not to say another word. "Andrews, fancy leaving this party?" Tony asked as his suit began to materialise around him. Peter nodded. "Hold on tight, Spider Monkey," Tony quipped as Peter hopped onto Tony's back. "Really? Did you really just quote Twilight at me?" Peter said with a laugh. Before they could respond to anything that was said, Tony ordered Friday to open the doors to the Quinjet, and the two flew the rest of the way to the tower. They'd face everyone tomorrow. Right now, they were going to watch Star Wars, and Tony wasn't letting Peter out of his sight. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you have a lovely rest of your day.